I found that people here were nicer than in the Midwest.
Andy Paris.
Moises called saying he had an idea for his next theater project, but there was a somberness to his voice. So I asked what it was all about, and he told me he wanted to do a piece about what's happening in Wyoming.
Stephen Belver.
Lay told me that the company was thinking of going out to Laramie to conduct interviews and that they wanted me to come. But I'm hesitant. I have no real interest in...
The company has agreed that we should go to Laramie for a week and interview people. I'm a bit afraid about taking 10 people in a trip of this nature. Must make some safety rules. No one works alone. Everyone carries cell phones. I've made some preliminary contacts with Rebecca Hilliker, head of the theater department at the University of Wyoming. She is hosting a party for us our first night in Laramie and has promised to introduce us to possible interviewees.
Moment.
Lee tried to explain to me, to no avail, what chicken fried steak was.
Now, are you from Wyoming, or are you just visiting?
We're just...
Catherine Connolly.
Was that... I was the first out lesbian, or gay faculty member on campus, and that was in 1992, so that wasn't that long ago. I was asked on my interview what my husband did, and so I came out then. Do you want a funny story? When you first get here as a new faculty member, there's all these things you have to do, and so I was in my office, and I noticed that this woman called. I was expecting, it was a health insurance phone call, something like that. And so I called her. I called her back, and I could hear her. She was working on her keyboard, clicking away, and I said, this is Kathy Connolly, returning to your phone call. And she said, oh, it's you! And I thought, this is bizarre. And she asked and said, I hear you're gay. I hear you are. I was like, uh-huh. And she said, I hear you came as a couple. I'm one too. Not a couple, just a person. And so she was a kind of lesbian who knew I was coming, and she wanted to come over and meet me immediately. And she later told me that...
When I came here, I knew it was going to be hard as a gay man.
Jonas Slonaker.
But I kept telling myself, people should live where they want to live. And there would be times I would go down to Denver, and I would go to gay bars, and people would ask where I was from, and I'd say, Laramie, Wyoming. And I met so many men down there from Wyoming, so many gay men who grew up here, and they're like, this is not a place where I can live. How can you live there? I have to get out, grr, grr, grr. But every once in a while, there would be a guy. Oh gosh, I miss Laramie. I mean, I really love it there. That's where I want to live. And they get this starry-eyed look, and I'm like, if that's where you want to live, do it. I mean, imagine if more gay people stayed in small towns. But it's easier said than done, of course.
Moment. Journal entries.
Today, we are moving from our motel and heading for the Best Western.
Moises Kaufman.
My hope is that it's a better Western.
Amanda Gronich.
Today we divided up to go to different...
I'm here today to bring
The
you...
Mormon Church has a little different thing going on that irritates some folks.
Doug Laws, stake ecclesiastical leader from the Mormon Church.
And that is that we absolutely believe that God still speaks to man. We don't think that it happened and some folks wrote it in the Bible. God speaks to us today, and we believe that. We believe that the prophet of the church has the authority to receive inspiration and revelation from God.
So the spectrum would be on the left side of that panel.
Boundaries. And one of our responsibilities is to learn. What is it that God wants? So you study scripture. You look to your leaders. Then you know what the bounds are. Now, once you kind of know what the bounds are, then you sort of get a feel for what's out of bounds. There is a proclamation that came out on the family. A family is defined as one woman, one man, and children. That is a family. That's about as clear as you can state it. There is no sexual deviation in the Mormon Church. No leniency. We just think it's out of bounds.
I warn you.
Matt liked to drink Heineken and nothing else. Heineken, even though you have to pay $95 for a six-pack, he'd always buy the same beer.
So, what can I tell you about Matt? If you had 100 customers like him, it'd be the most perfect bar I've ever been in, okay? And nothing to do with sexual orientation. Absolute mannerisms. Manners, politeness, intelligence, taking care of me, as in tips. Everything. Conversation, dress nice, clean cut. Some people, you know, just sits down. Please. Thank you. Offers intellect, you know? Within their vocabulary. So he just kicks it there. Didn't seem to have any worries or like he was looking out for anyone. Just enjoying his drink and the company around. Now, approximately 11:45.
Did feel lonely a lot of times. Me knowing that and knowing how gullible Matt could be, he would have walked right into it. The fact that he was at the bar alone without any friends made him that much more vulnerable.
So the only thing is,
Well, I took off on my bike around 5 p.m. on Wednesday from my dorm. I just kind of felt like going for a ride, so I went up on the top of Cactus Canyon. And I'm not super familiar with that area, so on my way back down, I didn't know where I was going. I was just sort of picking the way I go, which now it just makes me think that God wanted me to find him, because there was no way I was going to go that way. So I was in some deep sand, and I wanted to turn around, but for some reason I kept going. And I went along, and there was this rock on the ground, and I just drilled it. I went over the handlebars and ended up on the ground. So I got up, and I was just kind of dusting myself off. And I was looking around, and I noticed something, which ended up to be Nat. He was just lying there by a fence, and I just thought it was a scarecrow. I was like, Halloween's coming up. And I thought it was just a Halloween gag, so I didn't think much of it. So I got my bike, walked it around the fence that was there. It was a buck-type fence, and got closer to him. And I noticed his hair, and that was a major key to me noticing it was a human being. It was his hair, because I just thought it was a dummy. Seriously, I even noticed the chest going up and down. I still thought it was a dummy, you know? I thought it was just like some kind of mechanism. But when I saw hair, well, I knew it was a human being. So I ran to the nearest house, and I just ran as fast as I could, and I called the police.
I responded to the call.
Officer Reggie Flutie.
When I got there, at first the only thing I could see was partially somebody's feet, and I got out of my vehicle and raced over. I seen what appeared to be a young man, 13, 14, because he was so tiny, laying on his back, and he was tied at the bottom end of a pole. I did the best I could. The gentleman that was laying on the ground, Matthew Shepard, he was covered in blood all over his head. There was dry blood underneath him, and he was barely breathing. He was doing the best he could. I was going to try and breathe for him, but I couldn't get his mouth open. His mouth wouldn't open for me. It was, like I said, partially covered in dry blood, and blood all over his head. The only thing that he didn't have any blood on him was his face, where it had appeared he would have been crying. His head was distorted, you know? It didn't look normal. He looked as if he had a real harsh head wound.
I was working in the emergency room that night. Matthew Shepard was brought in.
There was nothing I could do. I mean, if there was anything that I could have done to help him, I would have done it. But there was nothing. And I was yelling at the top of my lungs at him, trying to get something out of him. Like, hey, wake up! Hello? But he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't anything.
He was tied to the fence. His hands were thumbs out in what we
First day afternoon,
Rulon Stacy at Poudre Valley Hospital.
I got a call. We just got a kid in from Wyoming, and it looks like he may be the victim of a hate crime. We have a couple of newspaper reporters here asking questions, and so we agreed that we needed one spokesperson. As CEO, I'll do that, and we'll try and gather all the information that we can.
And then I watched the 10 o'clock news that night, where they started speaking about the nature and the severity of it.
So I'm on the phone with Mickelson, and he's like,
We need to go to the arraignments so we can identify these guys and make sure these guys were in that bar.
so we go to the arraignment.
Moment. The essential facts.
First-term Republican up for election.
I am outraged and sickened by the heinous crime committed on Matthew Shepard. I extend my most heartfelt sympathies to the family.
Governor, you haven't pushed hate crime legislation in the past.
I would like to urge the people of Wyoming against overreacting in a way that gives one group special rights over the others. We will wait and see if the vicious beating and torture of Matthew Shepard was motivated by hate.
Matthew Shepard update at 3 p.m. Saturday, October 10th.
By this point, I looked out, and where there had been 2 or 3 reporters, it must have been 10 or 15 still photographers, and another 20 or 30 reporters, and 10 video cameras. The parents had just arrived. I had barely introduced myself to them. I looked out there, and I thought, my gosh, what am I going to do? Matthew Shepard was admitted in critical condition approximately 9:15 p.m. October 7th. When he arrived, he was unresponsive and breathing support was being provided. Matthew's major injuries upon arrival consisted of hypothermia and a fracture from behind his head to just in front of the right ear. This had caused bleeding in the brain as well as pressure on the brain. There were also several lacerations on his head, face, and neck. Matthew's temperature had fluctuated over the last 24 hours, ranging from 98 to 106 degrees. We have had difficulty controlling his temperature. Matthew's parents arrived at 7 p.m., October 9th, and are now at his bedside. The following is a statement from them.
First of all,
Seeing that picture in my head when I found him.
Aaron Kreifels.
And it's not pleasant whatsoever. I don't want it to be there. I just want to get it out. That's the biggest part for me, is seeing that picture in my head. And it's kind of unbelievable to me, that I happen to be the person who found him, because the big question with me, with my religion, is why did God want me to find him?
I know how to take care of myself.
At 9 a.m. Sunday, October 11th.
As of 9 a.m. today, Matthew Shepard remains in critical condition. The family continues to emphasize that the media respect their privacy. The family also wants to thank the American public for their kind thoughts and concern for Matthew.
Moment. Live and let live.